also kind of being educated at the same time. And then, unfortunately, with the clip that I got, it wasn't shown, but at the end, he does turn off the light and close the door to kind of show that, you know, her fears were turned off, like put aside. So then, we're going to watch the second clip. And so for the second clip, what you need to know is the father, he is a locksmith, and then you're going to see a secondary man, and the secondary man owns a convenience store that had a broken door, and he had called the locksmith, so the father, to come and fix it. But it wasn't the locks that were broken, it was the actual door. But the store owner chose not to fix the door, and essentially the store was broken into and vandalized and whatnot. So the store owner is really quite upset at the locksmith, and the scene opens up with a confrontation.
Give me my money. What? What money? You didn't pay for my store. Give me my money. Money, stay inside. Give me my money. Aplácate, cara. I want my fucking money. Give me the truck. That's not my job, bro. Okay, come on. Hey, I got $50. $50? You took everything.
Okay, so very different feeling, right, with this scene. Similar characters, but very different. So, I'm going to play it again just without the sound so that we could kind of like walk through the scene as it plays. So in case you didn't grasp, I forgot to say that was the store owner who confronted the father. So the little girl, again, just reestablishing, you know, this father-daughter bond. It's kind of like, I would guess for us, if we have dogs, like when we come home, they're like greeting us at the door, super happy. That's this little girl when her father comes home, like she's really happy to see him. right? So it reaffirms the fact that they're really close and that she really loves him. And then you can see, of course, that there's the gun. So then, in terms of fear, as an audience, we're kind of like, oh, what's going to happen? Because in the movie, you would be able to see just how angry this store owner is. And you could imagine for him to be confronting another man with a gun, like he must be very, very upset. So as an audience, the director is able to establish that worrisome of like, what's going to happen, right? Especially towards the father, where he's being confronted with the gun. And then he tells the little girl, let's see if I can get to, so she's looking and she can see this man pointing a gun to her father, and yet this is not the face of a girl who was hiding under a bed, who was scared just because she thought she heard a gunshot outside, right? So it reaffirms that the story of the father giving her the cloak that will protect her, she really does feel protected. Like she sees the gun and she's not scared anymore. Versus in the first clip, like I said, she was scared just thinking that she heard a gunshot. And as we go along, when she tells her mother that he doesn't have it, he doesn't have the cloak, oh, how convenient. So that's where she gets scared. She's fearful for her father, not because of the gun, but because she knows that her father is not protected, because she has it. And then when she runs out, this is where the use of light plays in. It's incredibly bright, right? So it's almost like her judgment is blinded because of the fact that she's believing in this invisible cloak. And so she doesn't care about anything. She just wants to go out there and protect her dad. So there's nothing else, that's where I interpreted this, the brightness that gets used in this scene. And then of course, when the sound is playing, right, at this moment, it's just music and then the gunshot. There's no dialogue. And in a way, we often always say like words are very powerful. But in movies, it's also the use of no words, or the lack of loud music and all that stuff. So just by having the music and the gunshot sound made it effective to where, like if you grew to kind of care about this little girl and her father, like it hurts, right, a little bit when you heard the gunshot, because you don't know at that moment whether it was a real bullet or not, because you just heard it go off and your heart almost sinks a little bit. At least for me, it always did. And you can just see like the father's anguish. You don't hear him scream either. So again, that play of sound is really important. All it takes is just seeing facial expressions can be very powerful. We do that all the time with people, right? We go up, we're like crossing paths with someone and their face is just like, okay, we're not going to say hi. Versus if they're smiling or they're a bit more relaxed, we might feel more open to saying, hey, how you doing? Striking out the conversation. So we can understand that, how powerful facial expressions can be. And thus that is portrayed in the movie scene, knowing that just by showing this face, you can comprehend the anguish that he was going through, thinking that his daughter was just shot and killed. And then as we go along, and then the other thing I forgot to mention, before she ran out on the street, when she said he doesn't have it, and the mom said he doesn't have what, I don't know if you caught it, but the little girl said he doesn't have the impenetrable cloak. Now, the writers did a very good job in choosing that, because remember in the first clip, the father took the time to describe the cloak as impenetrable and taught her what that word meant. That stuck with her, where she not only understood what that word meant, but she actually used it for her own self to describe the cloak. And then, let's see. And in case, for those of you who aren't familiar with guns and bullets, the reason why she wasn't shot was because the gun had blanks in them, which you can also see while it's blurred out a little bit because the focus is the fact that the father, like, he's really confused, like, why isn't she alive? You can still see, again, the facial expression of the store owner. He's also really confused. So his daughter was the one who actually bought the blanks, not him. So he also thought this whole time that they were actual bullets. So he is also has this look of confusion. And that's also important when we're talking about movies and background characters or secondary characters. It's not just about your main characters and what they're saying or expressing, body language and whatnot. You also have to have the detail of the background because that can be just as important in explaining the whole story. And then, so essentially then the family goes back inside. So overall, one last thing that I wanted to touch on with the first clip, to me, like as an overall theme, when we talk about fantasy versus reality, the fantasy was so much more powerful, right? The story of this fairy, the invisible cloak. That's what stuck with the little girl and made her feel safe. And then in this scene, reality is what's scary. The fact that, you know, this was in the movie, a real life situation and everything. And for the little girl, the fantasy was still greater than her. And she didn't know whether or not those bullets were real, right? She didn't care, she just believed in that cloak. So it kind of ties into this thing in terms of telling stories, being careful about what you say, because what if those weren't blanks? Then that little girl would have been killed or severely injured. So we do have to, it's nice when we have movies because it's an escape sometimes for our world. At least that's how I feel sometimes. If school's too rough or something, I'll turn to a movie because sometimes what's not real is better than what is. But then situations like this remind you that you can't just focus on fantasy. You always have to keep reality in check because that's the world that we live in. But so that's my 2 cents on these movie scenes. I could go on and on talking about the movies and stuff, but that's all I wanted to say about these. Thank you.